I was standing at my kitchen window when I saw the silver Honda slow down on the county road and pull to a stop in front of our gate. I knew that car immediately. My sister Vanessa. 3 years of complete silence between us, and there she was, parked at the edge of my driveway, phone pressed to her ear, crying so hard her shoulders were shaking. She sat there staring at the house my husband Derek had built, with reclaimed wood and calloused hands. The house my father had said we would never afford. The house that sat on 5 acres of Georgia hillside that nobody in my family had believed we could build. 3 years earlier, my father had looked me directly in the eyes at his dinner table and said words that changed everything, words that cost him his store, his standing in this community, and ultimately both of his daughters. But what happened at the fundraiser that spring, in front of 200 people who had known my family for decades, that is the part that still keeps this town talking. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. I spent 8 years doing my family's books for free. And this is the story of what happened when they handed my sister $100,000 for her wedding and told me I did not deserve a single cent of help. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, in a yellow house 3 blocks from Main Street, where my father Richard ran Henderson Hardware for 22 years. He opened it with borrowed money from his own parents when I was 10 years old, and my mother Janet quit nursing to work the register. And for 2 decades that store was everything, our income, our identity, the subject of every Sunday dinner conversation. I started doing the books when I was 24, fresh off my CPA exam. My father's old accountant had retired, and hiring a replacement would cost $45,000 a year. I told him I would handle it for free. I told myself it was temporary. That was 8 years ago. Every quarter I balanced the ledger, filed the taxes, reconciled the vendor invoices, and managed payroll for 3 part-time employees. In my second year, I caught a $14,000 billing error from a lumber supplier. I renegotiated the insurance policy and saved them $6,000 annually. Nobody threw a party. Nobody said thank you. The closest I ever got was my father nodding at a quarterly report and saying, "Looks right." My sister Vanessa was 3 years younger and worked at a boutique that sold $40 candles and scarves imported from Portugal. She was beautiful, charming, photogenic, the one in the family Christmas card, the one my mother brought to church luncheons, the one whose engagement photo went on the mantel before the ring was even properly sized. I was the one with a filing cabinet in my spare bedroom and a spreadsheet open on Christmas morning. I did not resent Vanessa then. I resented myself for believing that if I just kept the numbers clean, the ledger between us would eventually balance. Vanessa got engaged on a Saturday in April to a man named Bradley Parker, a sales manager at the Honda dealership who drove a leased SUV and wore watches that cost more than my monthly rent. The engagement dinner was at my parents' house, pot roast, the good china, a bottle of champagne that cost more than the roast. Vanessa held out her hand so everyone could admire the ring. 2 carats. Bradley beamed. My father carved the roast, and my mother kept refilling Vanessa's glass. I sat at the end of the table and ate quietly. When Vanessa started talking about the wedding, Lake Sinclair venue, 200 guests, live band, custom dress from a designer in Atlanta, orchids flown in from Ecuador. Bradley said they were looking at 80,000, maybe more with upgrades. My parents exchanged a look. Not worry, not concern, something else. The look of people who have already made a decision and are simply waiting for the right moment to announce it. I set down my fork, not because I suspected anything specific, but because the room had shifted in a way I recognized. There is a kind of silence that is louder than speech, and it sits between people who know something you do not. I had been doing books long enough to know when the numbers were about to stop adding up. My father set down the carving knife, wiped his hands on the napkin, and cleared his throat. "We're giving Vanessa $100,000 for the wedding," he said. "She deserves the best start," Vanessa squealed. Bradley shook my father's hand. My mother teared up and pulled Vanessa into a hug. I sat there doing math I could not stop doing. $100,000. More than double the annual profit of Henderson Hardware. More than I had saved in my entire career. More than 2 years of the bookkeeping I had been doing for them for free. I opened my mouth. "Derek and I have been talking about getting married too," I said. "Nothing big. Maybe a small ceremony." My father cut me off and looked directly at me. "You don't deserve any help." He kept going. Derek did not have a real career. His family had gone bankrupt. He was not throwing good money at a mistake. Nobody flinched. Vanessa studied her ring. Bradley sipped his champagne. My mother folded her napkin into a perfect rectangle and said nothing. I set down my fork, stood up, carried my plate to the kitchen, rinsed it, dried it, put it back in the cabinet, walked to the front door, put on my coat, and drove home to the apartment I shared with the man my father called a mistake. That was the last meal I ate in that house. My mother called the next morning at 7:15 with no hello and no apology, just damage control before coffee. Your father didn't mean it like that. He's worried about you. Derek is sweet, but he doesn't have stability. I let the word hang in the air. Stability. My mother had married a man who borrowed $40,000 from his own parents and spent 2 decades, 1 bad quarter away from closing. Stability was a word she aimed at everyone else, so she would not have to examine her own choices. I told her I appreciated the concern, asked if there was anything else, and when she said, "Don't be like that, we're family," I said, "Then treat me like it." She had no response. I hung up and sat quietly with the Georgia sun cutting through the blinds. Here is what I understood that morning. My father's refusal was not about Derek. Derek was the excuse. The real issue was control. My father needed the world to follow his blueprint. Steady job, safe marriage, predictable returns. I had followed it for 8 years, keeping his books, managing his risk. But the moment I chose something he had not approved, I went from asset to liability. And you do not invest in liabilities. My mother was different but the same. She had given up nursing to raise us, and when I built my own career, I became proof that her sacrifice was optional. Vanessa married young, stayed close, needed them. She made Janet's choices feel inevitable. I made them feel voluntary. They were not punishing me for choosing Derek. They were punishing me for proving they'd had a choice all along. That evening I told Derek everything. He set down the piece of walnut he had been sanding. Derek's father's business partner had emptied their operating account and vanished to Arizona when Derek was 16. They lost the house, the trucks, everything. Derek dropped out of high school, got his GED at night, and spent the next decade building his way back one job site at a time. He understood financial betrayal the way a burn survivor understands fire, not as a concept, but as a scar. "You've been carrying their weight for free," he said. "That's not what family does. That's what employees do. Except employees get paid. I wrote my resignation that night. Professional letterhead, 3 paragraphs, effective immediately. I am a CPA. I know how to close an account." I hand-delivered the letter to Henderson Hardware on a Tuesday morning. My father was behind the counter sorting lag bolts. I set the envelope on the glass. He read it, and his face went from confused to red in about 4 seconds. "After everything we've done for you." I had been waiting for that exact line. "What have you done for me, Dad?" "Specifically?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because the honest answer was that I had been the one doing, 8 years of doing, and the return on my investment was a seat at the end of the table and a $100,000 lesson in where I ranked. My mother called that evening. "When Derek leaves you with nothing, don't come crawling back." "I won't," I said, and I meant it with every cell in my body. Derek and I got married 3 months later at the county courthouse. Total cost, $1,847. My dress came from a consignment shop on Cherry Street. Ivory lace, slightly too long. Perfect. Derek wore the one suit he owned and a tie his mentor Walt knotted for him in the parking lot. Our witnesses were my college friend Emma and Walt, a retired contractor who had taught Derek everything about load-bearing walls and clean joints. We had lunch at a diner on Forsyth Street, chicken fried steak, sweet tea. Derek carved our initials into the wooden booth with his pocket knife while the waitress pretended not to notice. That same week, Derek closed on a foreclosure, a 3-bedroom ranch on Jeffersonville Road. Purchase price $62,000, buckled floors, rotted porch columns, a kitchen that smelled like wet carpet and regret. Derek looked at it the way a surgeon looks at a patient, already seeing what it could become. Our plan was simple. He would renovate, I would manage the money. I set up the spreadsheet that night. 4 months later, we sold that house for $131,000, $41,000 in profit. Our first return on investment. The partnership that would change our lives had officially begun. Vanessa's wedding happened on a Saturday in September. I was not invited. 214 guests, live band that flew in from Nashville, orchids that wilted by the reception because nobody had accounted for the Georgia humidity. Final cost, $87,000. My father gave a toast about investing in the future. Meanwhile, Derek and I were closing on our second flip, a brick duplex off Poinsettia Avenue. Purchase $71,000, renovation $34,000, sale $158,000, profit $53,000. My sister spent $100,000 on one night. Derek and I made $53,000 in 8 weeks. I did not keep score, but I am a CPA. Numbers live in my head whether I invite them or not. Bradley had leased a new BMW the week before the wedding, $740 a month for a car he did not own to impress people he would forget by Christmas. I filed it away the way I file everything, under patterns likely to compound. 7 months after I walked out of Henderson Hardware, my mother's number appeared on my phone. I was sitting in my car outside a property inspection, eating a granola bar, reviewing a contractor's bid. She did not say hello. She told me my father's back was acting up. He could not do inventory alone, and the new bookkeeper, the one hired from an online listing for $45,000 a year, had made errors on the quarterly filing. The IRS was asking questions. They might owe penalties. I waited. Counted the seconds. 3, 5, 8. No, how are you? No, we miss you. No, I am sorry about what happened. I told her I hoped she found someone to help, and that I was not available. She said I was going to let my family struggle over some pride. It's not pride, Mom. It's a boundary. I hung up and stared at the contractor's bid until the numbers stopped swimming. Year 1 ended and I ran the numbers the way I run everything. Precisely. 3 flips completed. Total profit $127,000 net of taxes and fees. I filed the paperwork for Morrison Property Group LLC on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Sarah Morrison. I had taken Derek's name, and seeing it on a business license felt like planting a flag in ground I'd earned. Derek handled design, construction, and subcontractor management. I handled financing, permits, accounting, tenant screening, insurance, and everything else that required a calculator and patience. We found a retired couple selling a small property management company, 6 rental units across Macon, tenants who paid on time and just wanted working plumbing. Purchase price $340,000, financed through a local credit union, cash flow positive from month 1. Derek builds houses. I build plans. Together we were building something neither of us could have built alone. That spring we found the land, 5 acres outside city limits, rolling hills, a stand of mature live oaks along the ridge, $78,000. Derek walked the property line without speaking for 10 minutes. Then he said, "This is where we build our home." I started keeping a personal ledger around that time. Not for the business. I had software for that. This one was different. I went back through 8 years of Henderson Hardware files, my copies, my backups, my records, and catalogued every hour I had worked. Every tax return, every vendor negotiation, every payroll cycle. I priced each service at the going rate for a licensed CPA in Middle Georgia. Quarterly bookkeeping, $12,000 a year. Tax preparation, $4,000. Payroll management, $6,000. Vendor negotiations and documented cost savings. The lumber supplier overcharge. The insurance renegotiation. The equipment lease I restructured in year 5 that saved them $1,800 annually. The total sat at the bottom of the last page. $247,300. That is what 8 years of free labour looks like when you finally run the invoice. My parents gave Vanessa $100,000 for a wedding. They told me I did not deserve help. And the entire time I had been subsidising their survival to the tune of $250,000. Something changed after I found that number. Not overnight, more the way a foundation settles, slowly and permanently, until one morning you realise the house sits differently. I stopped flinching when my parents' area code appeared on my phone. Stopped driving the long way through town to avoid the Henderson Hardware sign. Stopped replaying my father's words at 3 a.m. when the house was quiet and my brain was loud. $247,000. The number set me free, not because I would ever use it as a weapon, but because I finally had proof of what I had always felt and could never name. I was not the daughter who did not deserve help. I was the daughter who had been helping all along. The business kept growing. Year 2, 8 flips completed, average profit $42,000 per flip. 12 rental units generating $8,400 a month in net cash flow. 3 commercial renovation contracts signed. A dentist's office, a barber shop, and a co-working space in an old warehouse district. Morrison Property Group's net worth crossed $1.2 million. No family money, no inheritance, no outside investment, just a CPA's spreadsheet discipline and a carpenter's refusal to cut corners. Vanessa and Bradley separated 22 months after the orchids wilted. Bradley's spending had accelerated after the wedding, the leased BMW, weekend trips to the coast on credit, a $15,000 watch for the image. Their joint credit card debt, $43,000. The dealership cut his territory. The BMW went back. The watch went to a pawn shop. Vanessa moved back into her parents' house, the childhood bedroom with the lavender walls and the TJ Maxx sunset poster. 29 years old, scrolling through wedding photos on her phone. My parents had invested $100,000 in my sister's future. 22 months later, that future was folded into a garment bag in a closet. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt something closer to recognition. Vanessa was not my enemy. She was a product of the same system that had tried to consume me. The difference was she had let it. Our house was finished in March. I remember the exact day because Derek carried me over the threshold and I cracked my head on the doorframe. And we both laughed so hard, we ended up sitting on the porch steps eating cold pizza at sunset. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2,800 square feet on 5 acres. Modern farmhouse. Reclaimed wood beams in the living room. Oak from our first flip on Jeffersonville Road. Handmade kitchen cabinets Derek built over 3 weekends, sanded until the grain glowed like riverstone. Stone fireplace he laid himself from fieldstone we collected on our own property. Wraparound porch wide enough for a table, 10 chairs, and the rocking chair Walt gave us as a housewarming gift. Appraised value, $2.1 million. Land $78,000. Construction cost $410,000. When your husband does 60% of the labour, the math is different. I walked through the kitchen alone one morning, before Derek was awake, and ran my hand along the butcher block countertop he had installed, reclaimed from a bowling alley in Milledgeville. Every surface in that house was touched by his hands. Every number in our business ran through mine. My parents said Derek did not have a real career. Standing in a house worth $2.1 million, I thought about that more than anything else they had ever said to me. Macon is a city of 155,000 people, but the circles that matter are small. Church pews, PTA meetings, the register line at Henderson Hardware, or what was left of it. Word travelled. The Morrisons built a house outside town. Big one, up on the hill past the county road. Derek Morrison, that carpenter everyone used to call the bankruptcy kid, and his wife Sarah. Wait, Sarah Henderson? Like the hardware store? People started connecting the dots. Meanwhile, Henderson Hardware looked like a slow exhale. Inventory thinned. The shelves that once held every bolt and bracket in Middle Georgia now had visible gaps. Richard was absent most days. A help wanted sign had been in the window for 3 months. Customers were driving to Home Depot in the next city instead. 2 weeks before the fundraiser, Vanessa drove past our house. She was making deliveries for the store, a special order shipment out past the county line, and the route went right along the road that borders our property. I was not home. Derek was in the workshop cutting trim for a client's bathroom renovation. He heard a car slow down, then stop. He looked up and saw a silver Honda parked at the end of our driveway, engine running, a woman inside gripping the steering wheel. Then her phone came up to her ear and she started crying. He did not recognize her. He went back to work. That evening he mentioned it and I knew immediately. That was Vanessa, I said. He paused. Your sister drove out here. She was making deliveries and the route goes past us. I imagined what she saw from that road. The house rising from the hillside. White clapboard, dark shutters, wraparound porch, landscaped gardens, the workshop, the gravel drive lined with magnolias we had transplanted from a demolition site in East Macon. All of it built by the sister who married a mistake. All of it built by the carpenter who did not have a real career. $2.1 million of the future my father had refused to fund. Emma called me later that night. Vanessa had called their mother crying, repeatedly asking how her sister could have a house like that. Janet did not answer, because the answer was the kind of math even she could not rearrange. Sarah has that because she is Sarah and you dismissed her. The fundraiser was 14 days away. All three of them had decided to attend. The Macon Community Fundraiser was the biggest social event of the year, a gala at the Civic Centre supporting the local food bank and youth programmes. White tablecloth, silent auction, 200 guests from every corner of this community. Teachers, business owners, city council members, church deacons, every family that had ever mattered in this town. Linda Prescott, the event organiser, called me in February. Morrison Property Group had been sponsoring the Youth Baseball League, hiring local contractors, partnering with Habitat for Humanity on a renovation project. She asked if Derek and I would be their presenting sponsors. I said yes, not to make a statement, but because I genuinely cared about the community I had chosen to build my life in. Henderson Hardware had been a fundraiser sponsor for 15 years. This year they could barely afford the table tickets. Word reached Janet. Sarah and Derek Morrison were the presenting sponsors. Janet told Richard. Richard stared at the floor. Vanessa, who had moved back home and was still untangling Bradley's debt, found out through social media. "She's going to show off," Vanessa told Janet. "She's doing this to humiliate us." I heard about this later through the polite whisper network that governs small city life. My family assumed my success was about them. It was not. But I understood why they believed it. When you have spent your life at the centre of attention, everyone else's achievements feel like a spotlight aimed at your flaws. Derek and I arrived at the Civic Centre at 6:30. I wore a navy dress, simple, no labels. Derek wore his one good blazer and the tie I had bought him at the consignment shop where I found my wedding dress. He tugged at the collar every 30 seconds the entire evening. My parents were already there at a table near the back. Richard in a suit jacket that hung looser than it used to, Janet with her church smile, the one that covered everything. Vanessa beside them in a dress I recognised from the boutique where she used to work, still had the tag crease at the neck. Derek and I were at table 3, near the stage, presenting sponsors. Vanessa intercepted me near the refreshment table 10 minutes after we arrived. "Nice of you to show up where you're not wanted," she said quietly enough that only I could hear. "I was invited, Vanessa. I was asked to sponsor. You're only here to make us look bad." I looked at my sister, 29 years old, living in our parents' house, drowning in her ex-husband's debt, wearing a dress from a job she no longer held. "I'm here because I believe in this community," I said. "The same way I believed in our family, until our family made it clear the feeling wasn't mutual." Linda Prescott took the stage at 7:15 and thanked the volunteers, the donors, the committee members. Then she reached the sponsors. This year's presenting sponsor is a couple who embodies everything this fundraiser is about. They came to Macon with nothing but a business plan and a set of hand tools. In 3 years, they've flipped 8 homes, created jobs for a dozen local workers, and built one of the most respected property companies in Middle Georgia. Please join me in thanking Derek and Sarah Morrison of Morrison Property Group. The room stood. 200 people, teachers who had taught me in high school, business owners who had seen our signs on job sites, church members who had watched the Henderson family sit in the 3rd pew for 2 decades, standing and applauding for the daughter who had been told she did not deserve help. I stood, nodded, sat back down. No speech, no wave, just quiet acknowledgement. Across the room my family sat. Richard stared at his plate with the tendons in his neck drawn tight. Janet's smile was frozen in the way that takes every muscle in your face to hold. Vanessa's eyes glistened, and she wiped them with a cocktail napkin she had been slowly shredding. Throughout the dinner, a steady current of people came to our table. "We're so glad you and Derek are part of this community. Your renovations on Broadway are beautiful. My son applied for a job with your company and said the interview was the most professional he'd ever had. Each compliment landed like a line item on a ledger I would never have to show anyone. Richard found me during the silent auction, appearing beside me while I was reading the description. On a framed watercolour of the Ocmulgee River, he smelled like aftershave and something else, the faint metallic sharpness of a man, running on adrenaline and very little sleep. "You've made your point," he said, low and controlled, the voice he used when negotiating with suppliers. "Now stop making us look bad." I did not turn to face him. I kept reading the painting's description. "I'm not making you look like anything, Dad. I'm living my life. We gave your sister that money because she needed it more. She didn't have your skills." I turned then and really looked at him. 61 years old. Bad back dyeing store. Favourite daughter's marriage failed. Standing in front of the daughter he had dismissed and asking her to shrink so he could feel tall. "I needed it too," I said. "Maybe not the money, but the belief. The faith. The same faith you gave Vanessa without a second thought." His mouth opened and closed. He had no script for this. For 30 years his authority had been the final word in every room. Now he was standing in front of someone whose numbers were bigger, whose reputation was stronger, and whose voice was calmer than his. He turned and walked back to his table. Then 8 minutes later, Janet walked toward us. Not fast, deliberate, her heels clicking on the floor like a metronome. She stopped 3 feet from our table, close enough that I could see the mascara already starting to bleed at the corners of her eyes. "You're punishing us," she said, loud enough for the tables around us to hear. Then louder, "You built this whole life just to throw it in our faces." I stood up slowly, the way you stand when you want someone to understand you are not afraid. "Mom, I didn't build my life to punish you. I built it because you told me I was on my own. So I went on my own. She said she had sacrificed everything for the family. I said she had sacrificed for the family she chose. And I had not been part of that family. She and my father had told me so clearly at Vanessa's engagement dinner, and again at the dinner table when my father said those words." Vanessa had crossed the room behind Janet and said I always had to be better than everyone. I looked at my sister. "I didn't have to be better, Vanessa. I just had to survive without you." The room was completely silent. 200 people watching a family fracture in real time. Every eye in the Macon Civic Centre trained on a mother, 2 daughters, and 30 years of buried inequality finally breaking the surface. Richard sat at his table with his hands folded, staring at the tablecloth like a man reading a verdict he had already known was coming. I sat back down. Derek took my hand. I did not leave, did not storm out, did not deliver a parting shot. I returned to my seat and my dinner and my life because there was nothing left to prove. The Hendersons left at 8:45, Janet first, walking fast with her purse clutched to her chest, Vanessa behind her, Richard last moving slowly with his cane, pausing at the double doors to look back at the room one final time before stepping into the parking lot. The gala continued. The band played. One by one, people found their way to my table. Mrs. Talbot, the retired teacher who had taught both Vanessa and me, sat in the empty chair beside me. "We always wondered why you stopped coming around," she said. "Now we understand." A church deacon told me my mother had told everyone I moved away for work. "We didn't know the truth," he said. My 9th grade English teacher touched my arm. "I always knew you were the steady one. I'm sorry I never said it when it counted." I thanked each of them and meant it every time. Outside in the parking lot, Emma's husband, parked 2 rows away, heard fragments through an open truck window where Richard sat alone. "I was trying to protect her," he said to nobody. He had always believed it. He would always believe it. But sitting alone in that parking lot, while 200 people stood and applauded for the daughter he had said did not deserve help, Richard Henderson understood for the first time that intentions do not matter when the damage is already done. Janet was waiting by the exit when Derek and I were the last to leave. She asked me to come home for Sunday dinner, said they could try to fix things, be a family again. I looked at my mother, the woman who had erased my name from a toast, who had called me only when the books broke, who had spent 3 years telling church friends I moved away for work. "I'm home, Mom," I said. "I've been home for 3 years. You just never came to visit." Her face crumpled. "I didn't know where you lived." "You didn't ask." Derek took my hand and we walked to the truck. I did not close the door on my mother that night. I just stopped pretending it was open. The fallout arrived the way compound interest does, quietly at first, then all at once. Henderson Hardware went up for sale 4 weeks after the fundraiser. 22 years of bolts and brackets, and my father's pride listed with a commercial broker on Cherry Street. A regional chain bought the location for $160,000, $80,000 less than the building was worth. Richard signed the papers in a broker's office without ceremony. No toast, no speech about investing in the future, just a pen and a notary, and the end of a legacy that I had kept solvent for 8 years without a single thank you. Vanessa moved to Atlanta in June, took a job at a retail chain, register work at $9.50 an hour, a studio apartment she shared with a girl she met on a roommate app. 29 years old, rebuilding from a credit score in the low $543,000 of debt her ex-husband had left behind as a parting gift. 3 years of my absence had cost my family their store, their standing, and the narrative they had built around themselves. I did not cause any of it. I just stopped preventing it. There is a difference between revenge and withdrawal. Revenge takes energy. Withdrawal just takes the truth. My life continued the way well-built things do. Morrison Property Group hit 25 rental units by fall, 8 full-time employees, revenue tracking toward $1.4 million. Derek was designing a community workshop for veterans. Free classes in carpentry and home repair, funded by our company in the warehouse we had renovated on Broadway. I planted a vegetable garden behind the house. Mornings I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the fog lift off the hills. The oaks were taller than when we had bought the land, or maybe I was just paying more attention. A letter arrived on a Tuesday in October, plain white envelope, my father's handwriting, the same handwriting I had been reading in the margins of vendor invoices for 8 years. I opened it standing at the mailbox in the afternoon sun. 2 words. I was wrong. No explanation, no context, no request, no return address, even though I knew exactly where he lived. Just that. Blue ink on a folded piece of notebook paper. I read it twice, carried it inside, sat with it at the kitchen table for a long time, running my thumb along the crease. Then I put it in the filing cabinet. Same drawer as the ledger, same drawer as the life I had accounted for and moved past. Forgiving my father was not something I owed him. It was something I would give myself when I was ready. And I was not ready yet. Some accounts take longer to reconcile than others. The people who told me I did not deserve help gave me the greatest gift they could. The certainty that everything I built, every wall, every number, every morning on that porch, was mine. Built by my hands and the hands of the man they said was not enough. $100,000 for a wedding that lasted 22 months. $250,000 in free labour that nobody acknowledged. A $2.1 million home built with a carpenter's hands and a CPA's discipline. And a family that learned too late that the person they dismissed was the one holding everything together.